Good morning. I hope you're all doing well. And we're going to spend this presentation talking about Trail of Lightning, the term cultural appropriation, and whether the novel and Rebecca Roanhorse, the author of the novel, is guilty of cultural appropriation. Let's begin by talking about the definition of the term. It occurs when a dominant cultural group takes something from a minority group's heritage or cultural makeup and changes it and tries to make it their own. People have argued, for example, that rock and roll was cultural appropriation. Elvis took black music and made it his own, and the predominant white culture adopted it. Those are the types of things that can be used as cultural appropriation. At a worse level, it might be taking the clothes, mocking the accents, uh, taking something that a minority group does and turning it into some sort of a joke, but adopting it. It is why we have all these arguments about Native American mascots. Are we mocking a minority group's heritage? If you look at the bottom, this can lead to a feeling of disrespect among members of the group who see others stealing and commodifying their traditions and styles, making money from their tradition, from their styles. A recent example that came back into the news was the rights of the famed PSA of a crying Native American being transferred to an indigenous group. You can see from the link that this was on NPR on the 26th of February, so late last week. When I was a little kid, I remember the commercial. There were three or four of these public service announcements. One of them, he is in a canoe paddling it down the river. There's the one with the horse. And every time at the end of the commercial, he has gone past all of this litter, all of this pollution, and there's a close up of the face and the tear running down the face. If you look on the right side, you'll see that Native American groups contend that this advertisement was inappropriate in the 1970s and it remains inappropriate today. And the only time people should be doing it or looking at it is for historical context. Other than that, it should be put to bed for good. If you look on the right, Keep America Beautiful, the group, wanted to be careful and deliberate about this iconic. Iconic has a positive connotation. Iconic means that it is an icon, it is something that is almost worthy to be worshiped. And so we have this idea, is this an iconic advertisement or is it an appropriate advertisement? And even if you look again on the left, the public service announcement makes it sound a lot better than an advertisement. This quotation from Folsom talks about how perhaps at the start it was a rare thing to see Native Americans portrayed positively in pop culture in the early 1970s. As a person who grew up watching lots of Westerns, that's probably true. Throughout the 50s and 60s uh, and early 70s, the Westerns, the Native Americans were rarely, if ever, seen positively. However, if you look at the bottom, there's no agency for that sad so called Indian guy sitting in a canoe. He's done damage to the public perception, and support for actual Native people doing things to protect the land and protect the environment. In short, the argument is perhaps Cody, the actor, wasn't actually Native American. Wearing the buckskins, wearing the headdress, was taking things that didn't belong to him or his culture and using them for a purpose that in the long run harmed Native Americans. That would be the idea of cultural appropriation. And if you look on the left side, the power is faded. Native indigenous youths have a greater conscience about stereotypes and cultural appropriation. The son of Iron Eyes Cody, the actor, said the advertisement had a good intent and a good heart. I don't know if a good intent or a good heart are reasons enough to take somebody else's culture and claim it as your own. And let's look at two more examples where people have been accused of cultural appropriation. The first one, the American Society for the Defense of Tradition, Family, and Property petitioned Amazon to cancel the TV series Good Omens. Now, one of the problems was they originally petitioned Netflix, and so they became the butt of a lot of jokes. For the purposes of our discussion, let's look at a few of their claims. In the TV series, an angel and a demon are good friends and are meant to be Earth's ambassadors for good and evil. They try to stop the coming of the Antichrist because they like Earth and they are friends, and God is voiced by a woman. Several people, a lot of the media made fun of the petition, especially at the beginning when it was petitioning Netflix. But many of the people defending the petition came to the conclusion, as this tweet pointed out, as a practicing Christian, I do genuinely consider this cultural appropriation. It's distinctly New Testament in its content. It's not some vague monotheism. And it's the flippant coverage of this protest is cruel to people with sincere reverence. So it's not just, in this case, Peterson seems to be arguing that the dominant secular culture is appropriating Christian religious imagery. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide, but the fact of the matter is, the argument about cultural appropriation is not just isolated to things like Trail of Lightning. The argument about cultural appropriation covers the gamut. And while we're on the gamut of Native Americans and we're on the gamut of Christianity, let's cover the pagans as well. If you take a look at, it's another change.org petition, they don't necessarily use the term cultural appropriation, but when Marvel Comics changed Thor from a male to a female, because the male Thor was no longer worthy to wield Mjolnir, this group said that effeminizing the heathen god Thor is considered one of the gravest insults directed toward the modern heathen community. Thor is the plagiarized version of a deity whose followers happen to be against calling Thor ergy or unmanly. This is therefore not comparable to turning Spider-Man into Spider-Woman. A very real religious minority is being targeted and their dogma misconstrued and perverted for millions of people to see. Plagiarized version, dogma misconstrued, perverted, for profit, all of those things, if we look at the definition of cultural appropriation from the beginning, seem to make the point that they're arguing that Marvel Comics and in the comic book in the 20 teens and in the film in the 2020s was guilty of cultural appropriation. So let's go to the assignment. Step 1. Read the excerpts of the articles. One of the articles accuses Roanhorse of cultural appropriation. The other article defends her. The articles will be attached to the assignment sheet. And again, if you clicked on this video, you should be able to click on the assignment as well. They'll also be posted on Brightspace if somehow this part doesn't work. Step 2. Write a 1 to 2 page double-spaced reaction paper reacting to the articles. Remember that the paper is your opinion. I don't care if you think it's cultural appropriation. I don't care if you don't think it's cultural appropriation. All I'm asking is you take a stand, you use concrete details from the reading to support your stand, and you write a good paper. In short, the paper should answer the following questions. Should Roanhorse, who was not Navajo, have written a book using characters from the Navajo tradition? Is she guilty of cultural appropriation or not? Perhaps we should take a look at who has a right to tell the culture stories. Even deeper, who has a right to adapt a culture story? Who has a right to adapt Navajo stories, Christian stories, pagan stories? And does it matter if the stories are already known? The Hero Twins, there were books and comic books written about them already before Roanhorse wrote her novel. Stories about the Bible and the Antichrist are well known, and there have been hundreds and thousands of books with the Antichrist featured either as a object of study by Christians and non-Christians alike, or an object of fiction. Thor, same thing. The one thing I will urge you, as we look at the criteria, 1 to 2 pages again, but if you see the third point here, focus exclusively on Roanhorse and Trail of Lightning. The Good Omens example, the Thor example were just an effort to show that it is a big thing. And I think I mentioned this in class, I'll mention it again. My wife is part of a Spanish teacher group, an online group, and they have all sorts of arguments about whether uh, Caucasian Spanish teachers can talk about Cinco de Mayo or if that's cultural appropriation, whether having a sombrero in the classroom is cultural appropriation. There are all sorts of arguments about what is or isn't cultural appropriation. I think it's a serious subject, so give it some serious attention. Include 3 direct quotations from the articles. You can include direct quotations from the book as well if you need to. Properly use author tags and in-text citations. Should be submitted by noon on Saturday, March 4th. And please remember, this paper is in the random Kala stuff category, not the daily writings. It's going to contain far more weight than any single daily writing. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Hope you all have a good time over break, and we'll talk to you later.